of the Centre for Legal Innovation at the College of Law, and the principal of Mottershead Consulting, where she works internationally with lawyers and law firms in the areas of innovation, change management, and strategic talent management. Previously, Terri has worked as a lawyer, a law school academic, and in talent management functions for some of the largest law firms and legal associations regionally and globally. Terri has served on more than 50 boards and committees for not-for-profit, for-profit, legal associations and organisations. And Terri's work at the Centre includes collaborating with stakeholders to create an information hub, an incubator for new ideas and practical solutions to the most challenging issues faced by the legal industry today. Welcome, Terri. And finally, and last but by no means least, we have Clarissa Rayward, who is the director of the Brisbane Family Law Centre and is also known as the Happy Family Lawyer. Clarissa established the Brisbane Family Law Centre as a multidisciplinary practice where lawyers work alongside counsellors and financial planners to ensure that clients receive the holistic support they need at this challenging time. Clarissa offers a unique approach to family law matters, focusing on out-of-court resolution with training in mediation and collaborative law. And in response to the growing number of lawyers and other professionals reaching out to her, looking for ways of finding happiness in their careers, Clarissa launched her new venture, Happy Lawyer, Happy Life, a blog, podcast, and book which offers insights and resources for legal professionals seeking fulfilling careers and happiness both in law and in their life outside of the law. Please welcome the panellists. All right, so let's talk a little bit about why we're here and really the subject of the discussion today. And I think everybody here, whether you're in in-house counsel, whether you're a legal practitioner at a firm, a practice manager, a LexisNexis staff member, you know, we're all facing challenges that come with the evolving expectations of the legal service industry today. We live in an era where technology is shaking up traditional roles, disrupting business models and propagating what we could call an always-on mindset, and the legal profession is right at the vanguard of these changes. Technology continues to create new opportunities for business growth and access to the legal system that didn't exist before, making it a truly exciting time to be a legal professional. A study that LexisNexis ran last year on legal and regulatory technology found that 1 in 5 legal service firms had allocated more than 40% of their IT budgets to workflow efficiency and productivity technology. Another key theme that transpired from the survey is the growing trend towards mobility, driven by mobile device ownership and how that's made the daily commute an extension of the office. A quarter of respondents said that the time they use in the daily commute is really to conduct work-related activities such as reading emails and managing calendars. And our survey also found that technology has really impacted the face of the legal landscape by providing new avenues of flexibility and mobility, but it's also added a sense of constant connectedness that adds to the mental health concerns of maybe an already ailing profession. This year's survey will focus on the Australian legal profession, and we'll be releasing those results with as we conclude this event series, and we will make that available to every attendee here today. And we've really invited everybody here today to put people at the core of the discussion and explore how the pressure to embrace technology has impacted the practice, purpose, and passion of the legal professional. We've got some pretty fairly, I think, thought-provoking stuff to talk about with our panel of leading experts and innovators from the legal profession, and we'd invite you all to participate with us as we go. And on that note, let me tell you about live polling. So today we're going to be doing some live polling. So what we'd love you to do is grab your mobile devices, and I'm sure everybody has theirs with them, and please join us on some questions and discussion as we go. So with your mobile device, please enter the web address into your web browser on your device, pollev.com/LexisAus, LEXISAUS. And when you get there, you don't need to log in, but simply respond to the question on your phone, and we'll return to this a little bit later on. If you're having any problems doing that, just raise your hand. I am told that the LexisNexis staff are ready to pounce and help you if you're having any issues. You'll also notice on the screen here we have the Wi-Fi information if you need that for the venue. And also, as John mentioned, There is a hashtag there in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, HVC17, if you wish to use Twitter and engage as we go.
Which you should.
And by all means, as we go as well, if you have a question that you'd like to raise from the floor, please just do that. And we will very happily accommodate that question along the way. All right. So, everybody good? Excellent.
Yes.
Good. All right. So, let's go. We're going to start with a pretty kind of generic question, if we can, just to warm us up. So, Terri, I'm going to ask you this question first.
Ready.
Good. Really, so Terri, what attracted you to this kind of space, this law space in the first place?
Oh, that's a long time ago now,
Right.
I hasten to add, but I think it was, my folks kind of came from a small business background, and I guess nobody in my family prior to me had gone to university. And so I think it was a combination of seeing the various issues that had come up in their business life, and wanting to be able to assist them to solve those kind of puzzles and problems, but also I think as I got into it more, the people aspect of it to me was very appealing. So being able to work with people, build those relationships and support a broader base of people outside the family. So I guess solving puzzles as much as problems, and working with people, and also I think coming or having just that very strong sense of right and wrong, and wanting to help people find justice, for want of a better expression.
Thanks, Terri. Paul, I am going to ask you this question. You've obviously arrived, in this industry from maybe quite an unconventional route. And again, what attracted you to a career in law or the legal industry?
Well, I had 2 bites at the cherry. So when I first finished school 20 odd years ago, I actually enrolled at QUT to study law, and about 12 months into that, found that for me it wasn't where I wanted to be in that time and place. I subsequently went and studied and became a Catholic priest, and went down that track, and then had a bit of a deviation, realising that I wanted to get married and have a family, and those 2 things were unfortunately a bit incongruent, and so I left ministry. And Rachel Field, who'd actually been a teacher of mine at those 20 odd years ago, we'd stayed in touch ever since, and she said to me, well, look, Paul, the law is actually ultimately about service, and that's what you've been doing in ministry. This, is another way of serving people. So why don't you consider doing that again? And I happened to be working at a law firm at the time, and thought, well, look, the law firm that I'm at the moment, and thought that if I was actually going to be directing lawyers and telling lawyers what to do each day, that maybe I should actually get admitted myself. So that's probably my pathway to date.
Thanks, Paul. And John, I just text you this question.
I'm just tweeting, I'm sitting next to this great guy who speaks all these languages, and he's a priest and so on, and has an amazing story. And I'm dreading you coming to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Put the device away, John. Whatever way.
I'm just tweeting that. I'm getting it going.
we're definitely always on. That's for sure. Always connected.
Okay.
So John, I'm interested just in what you see really as motivating students to come into law nowadays. What are you seeing as motivations changing? Do you think, or what are you observing in that?
Well, there were 2 motivations for students coming into law. One was that they thought they were going to do something about social justice, and so on, and most law schools get rid of that in the first year, and make them realise that the 2 are not the same. And the second one is then, which usually comes after that, which is you can make money, lots of money if you go into the right kind of law firm, and of course, since the great financial crisis, the second one has kind of rather gone the way of the wind. The first one's still there, even more so in actual fact. But the problem is that I think what's happening now is that conventional approaches to law and legal education are grossly, awfully inadequate. They're just incapable of providing what we need now. So the tech space is filling up that gap, and this is why students are coming in. And I can see some in the audience who, I remember from the hackathon a couple of weeks ago, who are beginning to think more creatively, more innovatively, more profoundly in some ways. And so the conception of what a lawyer is something which is now undergoing profound revolutionary change.
Thank you, John. We're going to explore that a little bit, I think. Yeah. So let's go to our first live poll question, which hopefully we can get. There you go. There it is on screen. Which of the following is the best indicator for a successful legal career? If the crowd amongst us here would just like to answer that. You panelists, you should see that come on the screen here, and it'll be instant. One person, for example, has said personal satisfaction as we go. So whilst that's populating, Clarissa, I'd like to just ask you a question, if I may. How do you define success for yourself in terms of your role, your place in terms of legal services?
Such a hard one, success, isn't it? Because for me, it's really, I guess, what I consider success for myself has probably changed over the years as my life has changed and where I'm at in my life has changed. And I don't know that, I think for me it's about being comfortable with myself, and I use the word proud of myself. Whatever I'm doing, if I have a sense of pride about what I'm doing, that for me would be enough for me to say I feel success in what I'm doing.
Okay. And Terri, how about you? I mean, what are your thoughts about this? And again, legal careers and values and those kind of things. What observations would you have?
In terms of personal success?
Yeah, yours or what you see around you.
I guess I'm pretty much the same. I mean, I think that everyone has a different motivation for why they go into law, and we've heard a couple from John. But I think that at the end of the day, that is changing dramatically. What people are looking for now in a legal career to deliver is changing dramatically. Somewhat, I think, with the increasing population of millennials, and really a different approach to work, a different approach to life, really, I think. So I think we're seeing different values come as a result of a different population almost of people. But for me, it's really about doing something that makes a contribution somehow every day, and learning something new every day. And you'd kind of hope, because I'm the director of the Centre of Legal Innovation, I might think that way. But I really, really think that's very, very important. And however you find that. The nice thing is there's so many different avenues to find it now, which are ever expanding and increasing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, as we see this this poll populating, you'll see that nobody has said annual income, which is probably somewhat aligned to what's been said in the panel, but also consistent, absolutely, with what we're seeing as we've gone around the country here. And what is scoring highest here is personal satisfaction. When we ran our survey, which we did, and we've sent that out, we saw that the biggest indicator in terms of measure of success was actually peer recognition as an expert, followed by professional standing, and then positive work-life balance. But it is interesting. Again, these are values that I think probably maybe a little bit different than potentially they may have been years ago. Who knows? But I mean, and John, you talked there about this revolution, or this idea that what it is to be a lawyer is changing rapidly. I'm going to have to ask you to expand upon that a little bit for us now.
Okay. Well, look, I'm somewhat known as a law professor, but that's a disguise. It's a cover. Because I really don't know that much about law. But I am interested in lawyers as a tribe. So there are a group of people I like to study because they have interesting characteristics, habits, and kinship networks and things like that. And so lawyers are a pivotal group in society, right? I mean, they mediate to the state and the individual, and all sorts of other groups. So we as much as the old Shakespeare axiom is, we can't get rid of them because we need them. The thing to do is to have them in the form that we can like them in, which hasn't always been prevalent. And so, if we can reshape them and reform them into what I would call reasonable human beings, if you like. You may disagree with some of what I say. I'm putting it out there so you can disagree with it.
About John's Twitter hand.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah. So, you know, what I think we've got now is, I mean, traditionally you could become a lawyer by becoming, you know, a barrister or a solicitor or something of that sort, which, frankly, these days is great. Is great. Anybody who's a barrister or solicitor, you're great. And judges too, although I think judges are replaceable as well now. If you know, eBay does 250,000 dispute resolutions a year, so you know, judges in comparison are pretty poor dispute resolution people. But never mind, they're trained to get better if they use the right kind of things. So what I'm suggesting is that because of these sorts of things which are coming in now, you know, whether it's blockchain, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's machine learning, robots, and so on, there is enormous scope for people to come into the legal business, if you like, and I'm going to use that word business instead of profession for the moment, because I think profession is exclusionary and business is more inclusionary, if you like. So there is enormous scope now for people to pick up various aspects of law and legal services and so on in ways which they couldn't do before. And that is the result directly of the revolutions in data analytics and big data and all this kind of stuff, which is now coming in. Law tends to be a little bit slow to catch up with these things, you know, of course they are. And you know, look, you know, I did some research on insolvency practitioners once years ago, and there were accountants and lawyers, and when they introduced this new category of insolvency practitioner, they just grandfathered everybody in, and then afterwards they set up an exam which you had to pass in order to become an insolvency practitioner, and it had two parts, law and numbers. And apparently they had to dumb down the numbers because no lawyers could pass it. Only the accountants could do the law and the numbers combined. And so, you know, and this is what I'm getting at is that law now has enormous scope for a range of talents and skills and disciplines. And in actual fact, I don't think you need to be a lawyer now to do law.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Simon, that's probably a...
Go ahead, Paul.
That's a forced segue. No, one of the things when I first came to the profession, well, to operating in the legal sphere, I suppose, was a recognition that the lawyers that I was working with didn't necessarily have the greatest commercial skills. So they understood how to do the law, but their capacity to look at how we would actually grow this business was just something that was beyond their skill set. And so for me it was critically important to be able to look at, you know, scalability, systems and processes that were going to enable us to transition our company at the time from 4, now 2.5 years later, to 25. And it was all about responding to, and I pick up that point about service, all about responding to our clients' needs, saying, what is it that you actually want us to be doing? The issue that we also had was the reality that we weren't able to put 30 people onto a particular file to run it and drop all of our other work. So if we were going to be out there actually jockeying for work in the marketplace, we had to have the capacity to compete with some of those bigger, or at least larger boutique firms, even small mid-tier firms, who did have the capacity to do that. And so that's where, for us, legal technology became exceptionally important, because it provided that competitive advantage that otherwise we wouldn't have had any capacity to engage with. So from that point of view, whilst when I came on board, I had really no legal in-house or knowledge, the commerciality and the commercial skills that I brought enabled us to grow and develop the business.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I don't know whether any other panelists would have a comment on what's been said so far. No. Okay, so let's move to the next question, because we're going to talk a little bit about working habits now, because I think, you know, that is changing somewhat in our space too. Or maybe not changing, but, you know, is one of those givens in terms of the way that we operate. You know, with that work activity that occurs outside of office hours idea. Is it that we're expected to be available all the time by our clients and our colleagues? What's interesting is there are certain organizations and even nations. France recently passed legislation that called for the right to disconnect. And some large German organizations, I'm told, have put bans in place to ensure employees aren't checking and responding to their emails 24/7. I know, for example, my boss has certainly sent me, half a dozen emails since I've been here, asking me how Brisbane's going. But this notion of work-life balance or those kind of practices, is one to explore. So let's go to this next question. Again, this is a live polling question. Which of the following practices do you believe best stimulate work-life balance in the legal profession? And again, there's numerous options there. But I'll go to you first on this, Clarissa, if I may. What do you think about work-life balance and that kind of healthy that healthy space that we want to get into it? And have tech advancements kind of helped or hindered, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm not an advocate of the phrase work-life balance. I really despise it. And for myself, I'm a mum of a daughter and run a business and do what everyone in this room does every day. And when I had my daughter, I found myself trying all sorts of different things. I tried working 2 days and running my business in 2 days, which I was entirely unsuccessful at, and so I felt constantly like a failure. And then I was like, okay, I'll make it 4 days, but I'll make it a shorter amount of hours, and never achieved that either, so that was a complete failure. So I use the word integration, and for me, being comfortable with myself and being able to do things, I work and my life and my being a parent and being a friend, it all merges all the time. So some people would say that, Clarissa, you're connected 24/7, and I am, but for me, that's what I'm actually now more comfortable with than trying to be really regimented, and that's my personality, that's how I like to work. My message on this, so my work around happiness with lawyers and the significant amount of unhappiness in our profession, there is no doubt that email, connectivity and the overwhelm that comes from constant information input is one of the biggest drivers of stress and of the mental health issues that we're seeing in our profession. My message on this is that we are in control of that in our own lives, and we need to set up our own boundaries around how you manage it. And how you manage it might be different to how the person next to you manages it. But the point is you need to be purposeful about how you work it into your life. So if you were to send me an email now, something I'm trying at the moment that's working really well for me, you'll get an autoresponder that says, thank you so much, but this inbox is only checked at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. If you'd like to speak with me, you can book a 15-minute appointment by clicking on this link now. And otherwise I'll get back to you shortly. If it's urgent, please pick up the telephone. What a novel idea that is. And I found that's actually really helping me, because I found that when I was getting, I don't know what everyone in the room's like, but I was getting hundreds of emails a day. And when you can't respond to people, there's an anxiety that comes from, I haven't dealt with that email. I think a lot of us send emails thinking that the person's just sitting there doing nothing but responding to my emails. So the timeliness of it is a massive stressor for me. So being able to send that at least is saying to the person, I've got it, but I'm actually not going to deal with this. And if you need something, pick up the phone. Like, go old school, imagine. So I could talk about this issue for so long, because I think for me it's one of the biggest drivers of stress, of anxiety, of unhealth in our profession. I don't have all the answers, I'm constantly trialing different things, but I just say to you, be purposeful. If you want to check your emails at 5 a.m, go for it, if that works for you. If you don't want to, don't. But do what works for you with your life and be purposeful about it.
Thanks, Clarissa. Terri, would you like to comment further?
Very, very similar actually. I think that it is all integrated now. I don't think there's hard stops or hard starts, but I think there's probably two things that come to mind for me. One of them is to be present, and the other one is to be outcome focused. And I think with those two things in mind, you change somewhat a mindset, but you also change the landscape in which you operate. So to me, being present is, we're here now. There's the opportunity to meet people, to be with people, to interact with people, all of you in the audience, all of us here, to listen and to speak. And to me, that means, you know, being here right now, as well as you can be here, and being there for your clients when they want you there as well. That moment and that time to me is so much more valuable than a number of furtive interactions, perhaps by text or otherwise. I think the other one for me is being outcome focused, and it's a big one for law firms because that means throwing away the billable hour, and it means basically focusing not on how many hours we've spent on something, but whether or not we've delivered an outcome that the client values on time. And that's a very different mindset. And it was one for me that I would say I've had to go through that transition of being very focused, of being in an office from 9 to 5 for a certain number of hours, maybe achieving something, maybe not, to working predominantly for me from home. I have a flexible work arrangement 90% of the time, and to understand that if I can spend 3 hours on something and get it done and that outcome is achieved, that's it. I can go and do other things with those other 5 hours, and that's okay, because I'm still meeting the demands and I'm still delivering on time and all of those things. But I'm a person that thinks about that a lot, and I still struggle with that. I still struggle with the fact that I'm up at 7 o'clock starting work in the jammies, you know? So it is a big switch, I think. It's a big mindset shift for firms and for all of us, I think, who have been in that type of hour-driven practice environment.
It's interesting you say that. A few years ago, we launched a suite of solutions in Australia, and our marketing strategy, our marketing byline was, "We will save you time." And I remember, we used to sit down with customers and lawyers, and they would say to us, "Why on earth would you want to save me time? I don't want time saved." Yeah, exactly. So it's quite an interesting one. Paul, what are your thoughts about this kind of right to disconnect, or this whole connectedness?
Well, I think I'd echo to start with Terri's thoughts with regards to being outcome focused. So for us as a firm, there's a commercial reality that we need to hit certain budgets to be able to cover our costs, whether that be paying staff, paying our lease, and so on and so forth. However, one of the focuses that we've really been pushing of late is to sort of to be transparent with staff and to actually say, look, this actually is your budget. Now, you know, this is what our expectation is for this week, this month, this year. Now, if you can achieve your budget in 3 days, work a 3-day week. You know, enjoy yourself, take that time. And some people prefer to work longer hours on days and then have time to go and spend with their kids at school, reading, you know, and engaging there. And it's really about, I think for me, finding a place that enables you to say, this is right for me. I can't remember who said it was Terri or Clarissa, but the point about, it was Clarissa saying about, you know, people asking about work-life balance. Whenever I have someone who comes to an interview with me and says, now, you know, I'll ask them, what questions have you got for us? And they'll ask about work-life balance. Immediately my head goes to, this person doesn't actually want to be here. They're already trying to schedule time to be away from me. Is that the sort of person I want at this firm? Whereas if they say, you know, is there the capacity for flexible working arrangements? Great, happy to talk about that. And for a firm our size, there's a great variety of that. I mean, many of our clients are overseas, so presence in the office isn't as important. So I think it's about finding a place where I can say, you know, this is right for me. You know, with the numbers of, I read some statistic, I'm not sure how empirical the data was, but that said that roughly about 40% of the profession are dropping out in the first 5 years, you know, following graduation. And you know, if that's the case, I think often that's because of this culture. You know, I experienced it as a student at university where people have a perception that that working in a top tier firm is where I must be, and I try and encourage as many students as possible to say, look, go out there and try and get some experience in those different places, and find what's going to work for you. Because whilst there may be greater remuneration at some of those firms, there's also greater expectation, whether it be in billable hours or budgets. So I think for me, yes, there needs to be a greater sense of flexibility in the workplace, and I think that is one of the great benchmarks of whether or not a firm is successful or not.
Thanks, Paul. And you can see here that again our respondees here have said just 29%, just under a third of respondees have said that supportive management culture is the real driver around stimulating that good work-life balance, or as Clarissa mentioned, the work-life integration in the legal profession. I just want to expand upon this a little bit. I'm going to go to you again on this, Clarissa, if that's okay. Do you think there should be more focus put on mental health in terms of this profession? And it's a high-performing, highly competitive, highly pressurized industry, and how would you, if you'd like to see that, which I imagine that is what we would agree on, how would you like to see that kind of emerge?
Yes, I would, is the simple answer to that question, and I don't have all the answers on how we can solve this challenge. The way I've approached it is to focus more on what I think we as individuals can do. I think a lot of us turn to the organisations that we're in and expect change that will then ultimately affect us as an individual. And you can absolutely petition that, but what you can control is yourself. You can control what you do, and you can control what happens to you. And so, again, all of my work in advocacy has been, I've chosen the word happiness because it's a simple one that most of us understand. You can't be happy all the time. I think too, when we talk about mental health issues, a lot of us haven't had diagnosable mental health conditions, but I've certainly had periods as a lawyer where I wanted to be anything but a lawyer, where I've been incredibly stressed and where I know it's played into my life in terms of my marriage and being a parent. And so for me, I've really taken a place of saying, regardless of where you fit in that world, there's all things that we can do to be happier, to be healthier, to manage the work that we do, and it doesn't matter where you're working. They're very simple things. But the first one for me is health. It's the key thing in all of this. And we need to sleep. None of us sleep properly as lawyers, I can promise you that. We need to eat properly. That's not something that most of us are particularly good at as well. Don't start me on alcohol. And we need to exercise. We don't need to be gym junkies and doing marathons. That's awesome if that's what you do. But you need to purposefully schedule your life again so that these things are actually number one and the rest of the stuff's number two, because work will just keep coming. The to-do list will never go away. And you'll schedule the gym and you'll buy the membership in January because it's cheap and good and that's what it's all about. And by February you won't be going anymore because there'll be all that other stuff to do. So you've got to reverse engineer that and say to yourself, actually my health is number one. Everyone in this room at some stage probably would have been very sick. Most of us probably in the last 4 weeks, thanks to the flu. You can't do anything, and your life is so difficult when you're sick. If you don't have your health, you've got nothing else. Your mental health is part of that. So sleeping, eating, exercising for me are all things that we can do, and we actually need to make them number one. And work, to be frank, is number two. And everything else number two. If you're not looking after yourself, you can't look after anyone else. That's your family, that's your friends, that's your clients. And we're in a high-performance industry where it is our brains that have to do everything. So if you're not feeding your brain properly, if you're not treating your brain like it's some high-performance motor vehicle, you can't be great at your job. So it's sort of a bit of a no-brainer. And I think once you make that connection and say to yourself, actually to be the best sort of lawyer I can be, to be the best sort of person I can be, I have to prioritise this stuff, it becomes a bit easier to sort.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move in a slightly different direction now, if I may. We're going to talk again a little bit more about technology, and maybe there is concern arising in this space, and if I had to characterise it, maybe it's the concern that robots are coming, and the uncertainty that kind of brings. I don't know whether anybody saw the ABC iView doco that was on a couple of weeks ago. It was called The AI Wars. Did you see it?
Yes.
What was really interesting there, a little subtle kind of subtext that was running, if you watch the show again you'll see it, there was this kind of sinister music that was playing underneath all the time whenever there was AI mentioned. And somebody sent me a report that I'll just reference really quickly. There was a company called Pega Systems, P-E-G-A Systems, an American customer experience business that surveyed 6,000 adults, North America, EMEA and APAC, And they said a lot of questions about AI, but the first question was, do you understand what AI is? And 72% of respondents said, yes, I do understand what AI is. And then the next question was, okay, what scares you most about AI? And over 70% of respondents responded with really kind of super scary comments. So they said things like, 33% of them said it's never going to know me and my preferences as well as a human being. 24% said the rise of the robots and the enslavement of humanity is what's scaring me. 10% said finding that I get on better with AI than I do with my friends and family. and 5% said robots uncovering my deepest secrets. Is what's going on. So it's pretty clear that there is uncertainty in this space. We're going to go to a word cloud actually. Let's do that, shall we? So firstly, whilst we do that, again, word cloud basically means hopefully you'll see a number of words on your device. Just choose the one that you think is the technology that has the biggest potential game-changing effect in the industry. But John, I'm going to come to you straight away on this one. Talk to me about this idea of uncertainty and concern and technology, and is it all overhyped? Is it attention-grabbing headlines? Is it really going to change everything? Tell us about blockchain.
Not really. If allow me to go back to the 19th century, there was a guy called Karl Marx. Some of you may have heard of him. He wrote this book called Capital, which nobody's read, including me. And but in it, he sort of said, the returns to labour are going to decline because employers are going to move towards machines and things like this because we make more out of that. Labour's expensive. It's silly. It needs work balance and all those sorts of things. And really what it is we're just going through another industrial revolution in that kind of way. And so the ideas of Marx are still relevant today, even more today perhaps than they were then. So are we being replaced by robots? Well, yes, an awful lot of us are. And I think what's happening is there was a study done at Oxford last year which reckoned that in law, take law, which is probably the one that thinks it's the safest, that you could probably strip out about 50% of legal work today and automate it in some ways, and that's all the stuff that paralegals are doing, junior associates are doing, and so on, and probably quite a bit of what partners are doing too, because I'm sure that's pretty grunt work. Look, let me give you an example. If you take something which are called sovereign wealth debt contracts, these are things that when countries like Argentina or what have you put out a bond issue and they want to raise money, these things always include something which is called a pari passu clause, which means it's to do with people being paid equally, and so on. Don't ask me about the details because I'm just repeating what I've read in the review that I wrote. I doesn't mean I understand it. Anyway, what actually happened was with these particular contracts, which are for billions and billions of dollars, by the way, they're big things. They're done by big law firms in New York and London and what have you. Is that they take on average 3.5 minutes to produce because you get your template, bang, put in the details. The researchers, when they were asking the lawyers who put these contracts together, do you understand what's in them, all said no, we didn't. And then, but they just ticked over for years. These things worked because nobody ever bothered about them. They just were there, print it out, put it in the drawer, and get on with the business. Until a particular fund decided to sue on the pari passu clause in a small court in Belgium. So the first question was, where the hell is Belgium? What is Belgium? Why Belgium? It's not New York, it's not London. And what was worse was the Belgian court sided with the plaintiffs, saying, yeah, you can overturn the pari passu clause. And all these New York lawyers who are getting paid lots of money, by the way, are saying, what the hell, this could ruin our business. How dare some little, punk court in Belgium do this? Don't need to speak English. And so the first idea was, well, can we ignore it? Okay, we could ignore it. So we change the contracts. We can't do that. Risk potential was just too great. Well, they did ignore it, and then eventually it ended up in New York court, and then it became serious, of course, because it was New York. But what I'm getting at is that all of that kind of work was done in such a way that the human factor involved in it was frankly irrelevant and redundant, because most of it could have been done by machine, because in a sense it was really being done by machine. So, all right, a lot of lawyers, there are a number of lawyers who think they are invulnerable. And they will not be violated by this kind of revolution. I think they will be. I believe professors are probably pretty secure at the moment, so I think I can speak from a position of authority. But the thing is, a lot of legal practice is fairly routine, mundane stuff. Producing documents, reviewing these things, and so on. There might be a bit of fiddling around, and are we going to use ICC or Stockholm or either some other arbitration clause or whatever, and so on, which all will be resolved at 3 a.m. on the morning before you're due to sign, that sort of stuff, and then these things take over, and so I think we're at this point now where we're at a kind of tipping point when a lot of legal work can be automated. A lot of corporate clients are saying they're not going to pay for junior work because they think it's training. So Deutsche Bank won't pay for first-year associates to work on their work, for example. Google is the same. We're going to see more and more of that. So it's going to be harder and harder for law firms and lawyers to justify spending large amounts of money on training young people coming in. And this is going to disrupt it. Moreover, you've got the UK, which is now introducing online courts, which are going to be automated in some ways. And so there are various parts of I said right at the beginning, eBay is the biggest dispute resolver in the world, 250,000 disputes a year, all of which are done online and by machine. And so we can start moving into that space. There are areas like family law, which I think are probably really going to need the human touch. But surprisingly enough, there's a lot of online suppliers of family law as well at the moment. So is there any particular area of law which is no? I think even advocates could be replaced to some extent. But actually, what I think is really going to happen, and I'll finish on this point, is we're going to end up with a form of what we might call augmented reality, the human-machine mix. So if you look, for example, at the way a series of hospitals in New York are using IBM Watson artificial intelligence to analyze oncology cases, cancer cases, the doctors work with the artificial intelligence to refine the diagnoses which they're working on, not to replace what they're doing, but they arrive at the correct diagnosis faster, more efficiently, and less expensively, if you like, in that way. So I think that's where we're going to find the mix taking place. And if it means the machine can answer your email, all the better.
Thanks, John. Terri, thoughts from you on this one?
On the extent to which our lawyers are changing their work?
Yeah, this idea about technology and its evolutionary or revolutionary impact on the profession.
I think that we're in a time right now that is probably the most exciting time to be a lawyer for about the past 200 years. And I think it's really important to say that at the outset, because it somewhat taints how you look at this question. Is it one of challenge or depression, or is it one of opportunity? I think we also tend to think that all of these things are just happening to us, but as John's kind of alluded to, we see every day the same sort of press around changes in technology and health, changes in finance and technology. We've probably got Fitbits, and we're probably looking at the latest product that's been made available to us by our bank. And our clients are looking at us in exactly the same way in terms of that mix of technology and law. I saw a report recently that kind of categorised the impact of particularly artificial intelligence used in a broad sense in law, and they categorised it as artificial intelligence that assists, that augments or automates. And of the many, many categorisations of that, I thought that was one of the more helpful. So we've got a whole bunch of tools that assist us in the work that we do, we've got that real augmentation of where we're using platforms and processes and various other things that we didn't have before, but we've also got the automation. So we've got the predictive analytics that will become substitutes for judgments and, as well as assisting us. We've got all of those sorts of technologies that can assist us with various other things that John was speaking about. So I think that we have to fundamentally understand that there is this very clear division now between what lawyers do and what others do. And we would have categorised all of that as legal work or lawyer work or everything that lawyers did. But there's a very clear division, and that division is getting larger on, if you like, the legal work or non-lawyer intervention required versus the lawyer part. And for us as professionals, I think it requires us to fundamentally answer two questions. Firstly, what do lawyers do? And secondly, do they have to do it? And if we look at that and use the technology that's available and pull out of that the core of what is essential in a lawyer, the skill set that lawyers have, the value that they add, the relationships that they build, no robot in the world is going to comfort that person who is going through a difficult family law matter or about to lose their business or a complex legal issue that has a relationship and human function as a core part of it. So technology can strip out those things where we don't have that sort of value and leave that amazing core for us to use those skills in the most valuable way.
Thanks, Terri.
So I'm excited about it.
Thank you. And this will be the final question for Paul and Clarissa to ask this question. I mean, is that what Terri just encapsulated there? Is that the way that we really see the human factor and technology kind of playing a part in our business? Paul first.
Very much so. Efficiency, I think, is probably what I'd be looking at. It's funny, I go back a step, and I came home the other night, and I'd worked during the day and been at university at night, and arrived home at about 9 o'clock, and my wife said to me, she started telling me a bit about her day, and I said, look, honey, I just don't know if I've got the capacity to listen anymore. And she said to me, she said, oh, so you think our marriage is going to survive on 5 minutes conversation a day? And I think, I sit there and I think, you know, the reality of our lives is getting ever more demanding. And I thank heavens that I've got a wife who's willing to actually be that blunt and honest with me. But, you know, I look at these things and think, if they're going to help us with our efficiencies, then they're essentially important. I read a report about 2016 that of all the initial public offerings in the United States, I think it was 15 or 20%, I can't remember the exact amount, but 15 or 20% were ICOs, initial coin offerings. And, you know, there was one where, you know, an unheard of company, you know, a company that you and I would never have heard of, raised, I think it was $24 million in 23 seconds, the equivalent thereof. And that's what we're dealing with. You know, I think of all of the lawyers that would have been part of that process had it been a fully fledged IPO, and the you know the streamlining and the efficiencies saved there. From a firm point of view, we are pushed more and more for fixed fees, and so to project manage that, the more efficiencies that we can bring in, which enable us to be able to hold to that fee as much as possible, is essential. Now, I was talking with Matthew about this the other day, and you know, some of the software that Law and Order you know, employ, and what it does, you know, when you're assessing a data room, you know, for a due diligence process, and you're able to, you know, whittle that data room down to 25% of the documentation because of duplication or you know, irrelevance. You know, it keeps the data there so that you can still go back and have a look. But you know, that's the sort of efficiency that we need to be looking at to make sure that we've actually got the capacity to service the needs of our clients. I look at things like smart contracts and blockchain, which you know are working to limit the capacity for breach of contract in a process. And so I think, You know, when those sort of systems are employed, which again potentially lessen the need for a lawyer to be involved in some of those more tedious jobs, lawyers can actually focus on what they need to be doing.
Thanks, Paul. And Clarissa, final comments from you. And again, this idea of keeping the human factor and technology in balance. What are your thoughts?
I'm probably of the Terri school of thought on this one. I'm really excited by the technology because it's going to get rid of all the bits of my job that I absolutely dislike. So I don't know how many family lawyers are in the room. I can't comment about due diligence and IPOs and any of those sorts of things, but we have this wonderful thing called disclosure. As soon as there's a computer that goes through my client's bank statements and analyses them for me, and I never have to touch another one, I will never be a happier family lawyer in my life. What I do believe is, as human beings, we are entirely reliant on relationships and connection. It is what keeps us alive. And lawyers that tap into that part of their skill set will survive and thrive in this new economy. And you're going to get rid of all the stuff that you don't like doing. You're going to be able to sit down and have actual human conversations with people about stuff that actually matters to them, which will be joyous. I think John hinted at this. Much of that is what brings so many of us to law, but much of that is what's drilled out of us very early in our careers. It's the bit that makes me be a family lawyer, it's the bit that I love about my job, and I'm more excited than ever that all the bits I don't like, that someone's going to create an app that will give me the legal answer to the property division and I'll never have to think about that case law again, is the best thing ever. But to sit with a person whose heart is breaking, who is in one of the most significant grief events of their life, and actually be able to look them in the eye and share that moment, is something I do think we as human beings will always want another human being to help us with. So the lawyers that I think will succeed in the future will be client-centric. They will focus on what actually matters to their clients. They will build services around that, and they will benefit heavily from technology to get rid of all the bits and bobs that have been less exciting in the past. Do I think that means we lose jobs? Heavens no. I've got more people working in my firm than I've ever had before. Does my assistant do now what she did when I started my firm 10 years ago? Heavens no. Is she happy about that? Yes. Because she's also having human conversations with people all day doing joyous things. So I think no one should be scared about this. I think it's incredibly exciting. Do I understand what blockchain is? God, no. Do I need to? I hope not.
You do. You will.
But I think as long as, the fact that you're all here tonight probably speaks enough. If you're paying attention, you're thinking about it, I think that's all we can do at the moment. What the future holds, I don't know. Let's be present. Today we're all alive, that's good. We're still lawyers. John hasn't got rid of us.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to open it up to the floor now. Does anyone have any questions for the panel? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Phil Ware, Stanwell, in-house counsel. I like to think my practice is as far away from Clarissa as it could possibly be. Been in-house for nearly 20 years, do gas, electricity, water, whatever. But the issue about relational safety, at the end of the day, it's still a bunch of people. They're trying to do difficult things, important things, contentious things, and they look to lawyers to give them security about what's happened, what to do about it, where to go, and whether it's a family breakup or whether it's a new power station, doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of people who need to do a whole bunch of stuff. Some of it interfaces with legal things, and most of it's more practical than strictly technically legal anyway, but they look to you for comfort and security about what to do, plans of action, how to act and react in legal situations. And it's just as personal across a table as anything Clarissa does on any given day. It's just, we're just doing exactly the same thing, but in a different context. And I don't know what other people in the room do, but if you conceive of what you do as a lawyer as that, then we're going to have great fulfilling careers for a long time yet, augmented by all sorts of fantastic things, but augmented, that fundamental interaction about the humanity of somebody's problem, be it a corporate problem or a personal problem, is exactly the same. Or if you do criminal law, you're interfacing with the state. If you're doing constitutional law, it's high principles about human rights and the interactions of government with government and government with people. just different context, but it's all somewhere there's a person involved.
Thank you for that observation. I don't know whether anybody would want to comment further on that. Another question from the floor.
Hi, I'm Liz from Worklife. I'm a lawyer. I'm a customer life and so and it's more my thing. And I love it. You guys are talking about the customer service and client. My question is in regards to we spoke about efficiencies and wanting to be client or being client centered and just really trying to be there for the client. The challenge that I'd like to ask is how do you guys negotiate the sort of steps? You know, that the courts are put in place, certain bits and pieces. I know they're trying to come along a bit further on the way with online services now. How do you guys see that in navigating or negotiating that in the next couple of years? It sounds like we're at that tipping point where the law's trying to move on and trying to keep the courts catching up and getting a bit ahead of us so that we can catch up to them. Negotiation or thoughts around that?
In family law, I'm really lucky because the more traditional system, the court system, is so backed up and underfunded and problematic that it's no longer a viable option. So it's creating its own problem and enabling businesses like mine to deliver services that are potentially quite different. This will always be the challenge for law. There are so many rules, there are so many regulations. I have many friends that run amazing entrepreneurial businesses where they can do all sorts of crazy cool stuff because there are no rules around what they do. We are always going to be restricted. But there's always a way, and I think we need to come back to what does the client want and need, and if there's scope for change, for advocacy, then why not be a part of that advocacy and change it? My attitude, if you can't tell always, is there's just a way, and I'll find a way and I'll keep going until I do. But I don't work in work cover where I know there potentially are so many more rules than there might be in my world.
And I think people will step around it. We used to think that alternative service providers were something different. We now consider them to be mainstream, by and large, in terms of the way that they operate. So I think John actually alluded to it with the example of eBay and just the enormous number of disputes that they're settling through their dispute resolution centre, and many other commercial entities the same. I think if we can't keep pace, people are simply going to find other ways to settle disputes. They will avoid the courts, they'll find other ways to sort it out. And to me, that's our danger. Our danger is, in a way, acting so slowly and being so resistant or so defensive of the status quo that we effectively sit at the table while everyone else takes everything off it and nothing will be left. So our biggest danger is actually ourselves and our inability or resistance to change. And if our regulators are not changing the pace, the unregulated part of it will find a way through.
Just probably to add to that, I can't remember where I read it, but it was about this research around the number of people who don't actually access lawyers. So they've got a vast majority of people who have legal problems can't access legal services. 85%.
Yeah,
so, you know, it doesn't matter how many law graduates we can get out, people, there's a large proportion, a large volume of unmet need.
Yes.
So thinking about how even the technology and stuff can help maybe reach those people.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right, actually. One of the things I like to ask students is what is the most common form of dispute resolution. You talk about courts, mediation, whatever it is. And in the end, the answer is lumping it, doing nothing. You're absolutely right. Most people just do nothing because, and these are problems which are growing, if you like. Public funding for legal services is being cut back. I mean, I don't know about Australia, but in the UK, for example, you can't get funding for family law anymore. That's just gone. So most people are pro se litigants on their own. They're working with unqualified people who may or may not give them good advice and so on. And this is one of the reasons, of course, why all the online services have started to develop and grow, is to start filling this gap. Now, that to me is a double thing. So on the one hand, there's a public good in creating the potential for legal services because it makes for a better society. On the other hand, there was a professional obligation, I think, on the profession to probably say, all right, we're charging too much. What's the kind of model economic model we're going to use, because it's now being moved back and back and back towards an elite that can afford our services, and this is ridiculous. So I mean, in family law cases in the UK, you often find one side has a lawyer, the other side doesn't, and the judge says to the lawyer representing the one, well, you might as well do the work for the other one as well while you're here. So the lawyers end up doing twice the work for half the cost. In that way, that's no way to run a system, I think. And so, I think this is the positive aspect of technology. If it can come in and deal with these things, and people can deal with it. And by the way, as much as we might like to think humans are nice people to talk to, there is research to show that actually when people in trouble have been counseled by machines, the fact that machines might give random answers sometimes produces better results in the people than if they are given reasoned answers by a human sitting opposite them. So, I mean, I love humans. We're surrounded with them. I think they're great. I think they're great. Got wonderful uses. But they don't always do what we want them to do.
Thanks, John. I thought you were going to say I love humans, some of my best friends.
Yeah. I wanted to leave that bit unsaid.
Yeah. Indeed. We have time for just one more question. So, gentleman at the back, I think I saw his hand first.
Could I ask the Professor where he thinks legal education is most efficient at the moment?
Where's most efficient? I'm really not the best person to ask about that, because actually I'm about to do some collaboration with a colleague at the university who was the founding dean of the law school at Griffith University. And the reason we're doing this is because I said, Charles, I don't think you've moved out of the 19th century, and we're now in the 21st, and you've got to catch up. And so we are actually going to sort of try and bring together what we think are the appropriate needs and skills and so on for lawyers at the moment. Because frankly, I don't think legal education is doing it. It's largely governed by regulators who are way out of touch, don't know anything about teaching, pedagogy and all that sort of stuff, and what is relevant for people in a modern globalized world to do. So I think we need to be far more adventurous and thoughtful about what we're doing now. So, for example, we focus on property which is to do with land. Most people don't own land. Most people rent. Most people have property which is involved in things like pens and bicycles and what have you and so on. So the focus is often in the wrong place anyway. But in terms of teaching people skills, competences and things like that, yeah, maybe it's doing okay. I'm not quite sure really myself. Don't think it did a great job with me, but that's no guarantee that it might do better for others. But I think we can improve it, and I think it needs to stop being isolated.
Paul, do you have a comment?
It's interesting to be someone who is operating in the field, but also a student currently, and one of the things that I take as an example, blockchain and smart contracts. I'm not sure how effective a lawyer is going to be in the future who's got at least, who has no foundation at all in coding. So this isn't to say that every lawyer needs to be proficient in how to use Ethereum or one of the other smart contract platforms, but there needs to be some understanding, particularly if it's about plugging in some sort of an algorithm into that, as to how that actually operates, where there can be, or even understanding how basic contract law principles dovetail in with smart contracts. And it seems to be very much, I was looking for case law around this as recently as today, and there's none. But it's a conversation that needs to start. Similarly, I'm having conversations with Ross AI in Canada and the founders of that with regards to trying to bring a platform like that to Australia. Now, I sit there and think if you're involved in legal education now and you're not even making students familiar with the concepts of blockchain, smart contracts, DAOs, cryptocurrencies, any of these sort of things, which is going to be the language of the profession moving forward, then we're doing a disservice. Sorry, Clarissa.
You're not the only one. This half of the room's all going, yep.
And I think that's... And I
trapped by regulation, by the process, which mandate content and the way that it's interpreted in Queensland in particular. It's more liberal in other states. Like, the regulators want to know what cases you're teaching in contract to teach voluntary estoppel. What cases you're teaching.
That's crazy.
You don't do the first semester class
Insane.
for High Court. You know, it's just impossible. And that's, you're teaching a postal rule and what they need to know.
That's not education. That's induction.
And I think actually it's interesting. I was saying this to someone earlier today, that I think, normally, well, at least this has been my experience in the other disciplines I've studied, academia seems to be ahead of the crowd, so it's leading the way. Whereas I think well, sadly I was going to say in legal technology, I think it's actually behind the profession. I think...
it's the regulators who are behind it.
Yeah.
I have to draw our conversation to a close. I'm conscious. One of my jobs is to be like an airline pilot. I have to make this thing enjoyable and land the baby on time. I've failed you. We've got a little bit over time. So, but we will draw it to a close there. Clearly, there is a really interesting discussion to be had here, and I think we've had one today. I'd like to thank the panellists, though. That's Paul, John, Terri, and Clarissa. Please put your hands together. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts. Thanks everybody for your attendance. If you're interested in the CPD piece,